Hey everybody, how's it going? So today we're going to be going over an A1398 Macbook that appears to not be turning on. The first thing that we do anytime we work on any one of these machines that has no power is that we try to get its pulse by unplugging the battery, plugging in our charger, and seeing how much power the machine is taking. So what I've done here is I've hooked up my MagSafe power adapter to a power supply, and that power supply is going to assist me in telling how much amperage the device is taking. Now, luckily, we have Paul Daniels' software, which is going to allow me to connect the multimeter to this as well, so we can make some measurements. I was very close to giving Paul Daniels credit for the power supply software, which he did not make. That was, I believe, from Circuit Specialists, and it's pretty cool stuff over here. Now, as you can see, we're stuck at 266 milliamps. Now, one thing that is really, really helpful if you are privy to it is if you go to the repair wiki over here, what you can do is you can actually find a repair guide for this particular year and model. This board over here is an 820-00138, but it's very similar to the 00163 and 00426. So you click over here, and when the board is taking 250 milliamps, that tends to mean that there is a short to ground on PP bus G3 hot. Now, unfortunately, that is not listed here, so I got to edit this entry to say that. Actually, never mind. It says taking 0.2 amps over here. But no. Yeah, I got to add that, 268 milliamps. So that typically tends to mean PP bus G3 hot is shorted to ground. So what I'd like to do is actually measure and see if that's the case. Also, when PP bus G3 hot is shorted to ground on this device, it tends to be a dead CPU MOSFET, and the dead CPU MOSFET tends to result in a dead CPU, which I'm very much so hoping is not the case here, as it is very, very, very often with this machine, almost to the point that we don't actually even bother taking it out of the case. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to put Paul Daniels' multimeter software here on the screen, and we are going to see if the multimeter software works. Let's see if it works. Not responding. Ahem. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Good multimeter software. Good Australian software. So I'm going to measure PP bus G3 hot because that tends to be what is shorted to ground when it's taking 200 milliamps. And what do you know? 0.2 volts. 0.2 volts. Now let's see. Spidey Sense says that PP bus is shorted to ground. Joy. And now we're going to do one more measurement that's going to confirm that I'm most likely wasting my time on this computer, which is measuring the resistance between PP bus and CPU coil. 19 ohms. Okay, there's a chance. 19 ohms. Okay, there's a fighting chance. Okay, here we're good. So what I'm doing is this is shorted to ground, right? PP bus is shorted to ground, 0.5 ohms. I wanted to see if the CPU was shorted to PP bus because oftentimes, as I went over in a video 2 days ago with CPU health, which I'll try to remember to link down below, but if I don't, hopefully one of you in the comments will remember to do it, and I'll pin it as a comment later, is I want to see if these CPU MOSFETs over here are shorting PP bus directly to the CPU or to ground through the CPU. And that's a common issue. And if that happens most of the time when you know that happened, it's a complete waste of time to work on the device because if the CPU got punched in the face with 12 volts, everything's going to be dead. Now on this board, what I'm happy to see is that it doesn't seem like the CPU is got 12 volts because the resistance between the CPU V-core coil and PP bus is 20 ohms. Not what I'd like to see, but better than 0.5 or 1 ohm or 2 ohm, which is often the case. JK Computer Services in your favorite city, San Diego. I remember you, Carl. I remember JK Computer Services. I think you've bought stuff from us before. I remember seeing your name on a shipping label for some reason. I've had 2 of these last week with dead CPUs, so yes, I feel the pain. Well, anytime our Australian brother feels the pain, I share it. Last thing I'd want is for Paul Daniels to have pain. Or feel pain. Alrighty. Take the board out of the case. Are we all excited? Everybody here excited today? We got a board to fix. Wait, Lewis, you hate San Diego. I don't hate San Diego. I hate the price of the real estate in San Diego. I visited San Diego a few times. It's not bad. It's just, it's like the area that I live in right now, where kind of got to be rich. I am not as rich as most people think that I am. One of the things that's made me feel depressed is when many people will comment saying, I can't believe someone donated to this millionaire or this millionaire that does this, that, and the other. Being a millionaire is not an insult. The insult, I think, is in the fact that people think that I'm a millionaire because someone who runs a business of this size for as long as I have and someone who has as many followers as I have, I think the insult is in, if you're not a millionaire with the opportunities that have been presented to you, then you are an idiot or a fool. Which is an interpretation that I often take from that assumption and that comment. And sometimes it messes with my confidence. That I don't want to live someplace where a middle class house is like 800 or 900K. I'm just not interested in that. Someday, if circumstances change, then I wouldn't really care. But I don't want to live someplace where like an average ass house is 800K. It's just not appealing to me. It's not appealing to me. What are your thoughts on Sennheiser headphones? They make some nice headphones. I have the crappy set, the HD 280s. I don't have any of the nice ones at home. San Diego does have nice climate. It really does. They also have a very large homeless problem. The last time I visited San Diego was 2016, though. December of 2016. I went to a restaurant on Christmas, and I got a bunch of food. I spent like $35 on this truffled gnocchi dish. It was really beautiful tasting. It was amazing. I had just eaten too much, so I hadn't even opened this particular dish, even though it looked really good. And there was a guy that was asking for food outside. I, being an idiot, actually thought he wanted food. So I said, here, have this. And he opens the bag. He looks at it, and he takes it, and he fucking throws it at me. Like he threw a $35 dish of food that I could have taken back to the hotel and eaten the next day, right at me. It's like, if I wanted that shit, I could just stay in New York. If I wanted to live someplace where like a home is that fucking expensive and deal with that shit, I have that right here. It's like, you're making me homesick. So San Diego did look nice, but it has its issues. Okay, let's get this board out of the case. If this one has a bug on it too, I will lose my mind. Okay, we're going to take the board and put it on the desk, and we're going to take everything else and put it aside so that we could focus just on the motherboard. So I'm going to take all of this stuff and I'm going to put it somewhere else so that we can focus on the task at hand, which is the motherboard, and not everything else that's in the case. Paul had me a nice tour of your shop last November when I was visiting with my daughter. At least San Diego has a lovely ocean to swim in. Yeah, you do have an ocean to swim in that's nicer, and the beach there is nicer than like Coney Island Beach. It's a considerable upgrade. Okay, so PP342 has to be present because you get a light in the charger. You need PP342 to be present and get a light in the charger because you need PP342_G3 hot to be present in order for the SMC to turn on, which speaks to the charger, which turns the light on. And you also need PP342_G3 hot to be present in order for the one-wire circuit to allow the charger to speak to the SMC rather than to cock-block the communication. So that means that we do have that power rail, and we also have PPDCIN G3 hot coming through, but it doesn't look like we have PP bus G3 hot. So let's open up a schematic and a board view for this particular board and see if we can figure out what's going on and what's wrong with it. I think this may be the board where I don't actually have the schematic and board view for it, but I have someone. Yeah, this is a scam. So it looks like whoever was selling this board view as the one for this board is scamming people. This is the 3787 board view, and they're selling it as for this machine, which is really, really, really lame. Let's extract another one. Maybe I think this one may be it. Let's see if this is it. Nope, same shit. See the tiny square trackpad connector over here? That square trackpad connector does not match the rectangular one on this board. So everybody selling the 820-00138 board view, I've noticed, was selling a fake, a fraud. So we're going to open up a board view that's similar. This is not the same one. This is the board view for a board that has a GPU on it. This one obviously does not have a GPU on it, but a lot of the rest of it is the same, and this is what I have to work with. Lewis, you can find excuses not to move. It's not an excuse not to move. It's a reason to not move to fucking California. It is not an excuse to not move to say, I don't want to live in California. Not want to live in California means I don't want to spend $1 million in a house where when I walk outside, you deal with all the same crap that you deal with in New York and get taxed up the ass for the privilege of the experience. Like, no. There's a lot of the country that you can move to that's not New York. Saying that is an excuse to not leave New York is ridiculous. You have 48 other states to explore that are not California, and I am more than happy to explore those 48 states that are not California. Again, like the housing prices there are just no. It's just like just no. I have no desire to go to California. It has all of the same problems that New York does with mildly nicer weather. Just no. Okay, so go through here, and we are going to go down the list, and we are going to try and figure out what may be causing PP-Bus G3 hot to be 0.2 volts instead of what we expect it to be, which is 12.6 volts. So first thing I'm going to do is just measure each side of the fuse over here. Each side of the fuse, we got, 1.2 volts here, 0.6 volts here. All right, we got that short to ground. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove both fuses because I want to see which side is that short on. So I want to see if the short to ground is on the side that is responsible for creating PP-Bus G3 hot, or is it on the side that is responsible for taking the power that's created. So let's just take a look at this. So you put the schematic on the screen, and over here, so see it has this two system. So you have two system. So the short could be over here, or the short could be over here, where it's taking 18 volts and turning it into 12.56 volts. Now, I don't know which side the short is on. So what I'm going to remove these fuses. Then I'm going to measure. Is my short here? Is my short here? Is my short here? One way to find out. So what I'm going to do, before I do any real digging into the short detection or injecting power on the board, is I want to see where that is. So I'm going to remove that fuse, which is kind of like the drawbridge here. Realistically, what is your timeline for leaving New York? I do not have a timeline, because when you have a timeline that you create for yourself, now you're forced to stick to it regardless of circumstances or your situation. So I am not holding myself to a timeline. I have no need to hold myself to a timeline. Okay, we're going to get those fuses out of here. Almost there. All right, so I've taken the fuses, and I will put them aside over here for use later. Now, which side is the short on? We're going to put this back in ohms mode, and we're going to measure on the left side. And the left side is going to be the side that creates PP-Bus G3 hot. Is the short there? No. Battery side? No. Creation side? 0. 0. Okay, so it's going to be on the side that's responsible for creating PP-Bus G3 hot. Now, just in case it is a MOSFET that's sending power to the CPU, which I doubt it is because we have 20 ohms between the MOSFET and we have between the MOSFET for the CPU and PP-Bus G3 hot, but just in case it is, so I can feel it. I'm not going to feel any heat. If I have the heatsink on the CPU, we're going to take the heatsink off of the CPU. Would you say that Mac repair is simpler than iPhones or iPads? That's too generic a question. Are you talking about screen repair on an iPhone? Or are you talking about data recovery based doing trace damage on an iPhone? It's too general a question to be able to answer. Will anything change with the right to repair bill Biden signed? Biden did not sign a right to repair bill. That is a common misconception. He had an executive order asking the FTC to create rules. That is not a bill. That is not a law. That is literally him saying, you guys should do something about this. So what Biden did is he signed an executive order that said, you guys should do something about this. What did they do? Will they do anything? We wait and see. But no, Biden has not signed a right to repair bill. It's a start, and I'm happy to get that start. I'm happy that Biden signed that. If that winds up actually becoming something, if that actually turns into something that's useful, you might even catch me calling him names like Based Biden. But we'll see. I have very, very, very steep doubts that politicians will ever actually do something that is helpful for the American citizen or consumer. I tend to be cynical, but we'll see. We will see. I will do everything that I can to speed this process along. I assure you, we are doing a lot to try and speed this process along and make sure that this opportunity is not wasted. They have asked the FTC to create rules. I'm gonna be a thorn in the FTC side for a long time. I shouldn't say thorn. What I'd like to do is I would like to provide them with all the information that they need so that they have an idea what the rules are that they should be making. I would like to do, they have a lot of shit that they got to deal with. But the FTC has a lot of stuff they have to deal with, so I want to try and make it easy for them by saying, oh, okay, by the way, here are the rules that are being broken in antitrust law. Here's how they're usually remedied. Here's a set of ways that you could fix these particular things so that they don't have to write it all themselves. I kind of want to have as much as humanly possible laid out ahead of time, if that makes any sense. Okay, so I'm going to turn my power supply down to 1 volt, and we are going to inject voltage into this board. Average home in Oklahoma is $300K and storefronts an average of $12 a square foot. Also has right to repair presented in the state senate. Okay, Oklahoma may be a place to check out. Oklahoma was never on my list, but we'll see. So, all right, so at 1 volt, we're taking 5 amps. So something is going to be getting really, really hot here. So I'm going to lower the voltage a little bit to 0.7 volts. Turn it on. Okay, so something's using 3 amps. So we're going to do an OWI test. Is anybody familiar with what the OWI test is? So what we're doing is we're injecting voltage into the board so that we can figure out what gets hot. So whatever it is that is getting hot is going to be whatever it is that's shorting our power rail to ground, whatever that is going to be taking all of that energy and sending it to ground, which means it's going to get really hot. So what I want to do is I want to shove some voltage into PP bus G3 hot and see what it is that gets hot. So I have the power supplies positive going to PP bus G3 hot, the power supplies ground going to the ground of the board. Now whatever it is that is shorting PP bus to ground is going to get warm. And if it's the CPU, I am going to be epically fucking pissed. OWI test, indeed. And I believe we found it. And I didn't even find it with an OWI test. I found it with my eyes. I'm honestly very embarrassed that I wasn't able to see this immediately, because this is the kind of thing that I would criticize the chat for not seeing immediately. But this is something that could have and should have been found on visual inspection. There is no reason for me to have to have removed those 2 fuses or run any power through the board to see that this is the cause of our problem. This is something that you would not need a microscope for. This is something that I should have seen the moment that I took the bottom case off of the device, and it's kind of shameful that I didn't. This capacitor here has a giant crack on the top of it. This is bad, and yeah, look at that. That's no good. Now, let's see, I could put more power through it. Make it get a little warmer, turn colors. And if, I'm not going to do an OWI test right now because I don't want to go, oh. But if I were to put some alcohol in there, as you can see, ouch. Have you heard of Australia's surveillance legislation amendment identifying disrupt bill? Next rant video idea. I've heard about it, but I would have to read a lot into it to really be able to get into what my thoughts are on it. So I haven't done something on that yet. But doing the very, very basic cursory research that I did, that bill scares the piss out of me because I don't want that to be the basis for them getting, more frisky on the Patriot Act here in the USA. Okay, we're going to replace that capacitor. You're going to replace that cap over there. And let's put my fuses back on. Motherfucker. Let's try that again. Go. Go, fuse. It's your birthday. What's the main reason people watch your YouTube now? I get interested in past, but love your ramblings. I have no idea. I seriously have no idea why anybody watches anything I produce. No idea. Now this is really difficult because you have the PCH right next to this, and I'm going to need a lot of heat to remove this, but I have this chip next to it. And I'm going to want to limit the amount of heat that I apply to it. So I'm going to try to pry this cap off of the board using a soldering iron. Now obviously I don't have to care if I'm nice to this capacitor because it's already broken and destroyed. Bye-bye. See how that works? Easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. Easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. Excuse me. So many weird little pieces of dirt on the board. Come on. This board has a lot of thermal mass over here. Like you notice that my iron is really struggling to melt the solder on that pad. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find something that's metal, like let's say this box cutter over here, and I'm going to put it over the PCH chip that's right next to the capacitor, because I don't want to heat my PCH, which is my platform controller hub, a BGA chip. I don't want to heat that so close while I'm working on this capacitor. So that's going to be like my heat sink. It's going to grab most of my heat if that's going on top of there, so it doesn't go on this area where my cap is that I'm soldering. I'm going to grab my donor board. A hot tweezer does not have the thermal mass for this area. At least not the ones that we use, Sonny. I do not ship to Europe, Katsiko. I turned off international shipping a while ago. They lose too many packages. This is also a really weird area because you have the SSD connector over there, you have the speaker connector, you have all sorts of things that are going to melt as you're hot airing this in. And as you can see, my speaker connector has not melted at all, nor has my SSD connector. None of the plastic has melted, even the tiniest bit. And the way you do that is you are very, very slow. Very, very slow with preheating the board so that you don't need to have as much heat directly on there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cool it off using Rapid Cool technology. So Rapid Cool technology is Rossmann Group patent pending. And after the Rapid Cool, we're going to turn it on, and you're going to see that the fan spins, which is how we know that it's done. Okay, power supply software, set it back to 18 volts. Output on. It's weird that when you have the output set to off on the power supply, it thinks it's taking 5 amps even if it's not. Okay, now it just stopped doing that. That's weird. I'm planning on donating. Should I donate to C3 or C4? I want to go to where you think it will help most. Salem, at this point, honestly, C3 is highly restrictive. With like, I have more C3 money than I know what to do with. It's just the C3 is highly restrictive. But the C3 gets you a tax write-off. So I would say C4 is where the fun is at. And thank you very much, and I hope to see you next week. By the way, as you can see, we have fan spin over here, which means we're done. So, yep, that is that. So we had a short circuit to ground on PP-Bus G3 Hot. And 99% of the time on this particular model motherboard, the short to ground on PP-Bus G3 Hot is through the CPU MOSFET that also sends 12 volts over to the CPU. We measured the resistance between the CPU coil and PP-Bus G3 Hot, and it was 20 ohms, which gave us hope that it was something else. Now, it's really, really embarrassing that I missed that cap. I usually have the type of sight where over somebody's shoulder, I can see a corroded pin on a chip. So to miss a cap that was cracked and to spend so much time looking around the board to actually remove the fuses and do all of that is fairly embarrassing. I would consider that a fail by my judgment, because this should have been a board that was instantly fixable. This board should have taken less than 90 seconds to diagnose and fully repair. So this is fixed, but I still consider that a fail. That's a little too slow, and my eyes should have caught that, and I hope that your eyes have been trained to catch that as a result of watching me fail through this video. That's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now.